Fox News alert. We just heard from President Trump meeting with Japanese PM Abe. They will meet again later this hour along with the Prime Minister of India. This as the White House weighs in on the decision to cancel a formal meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin. This is Outnumbered, and I'm Melissa Francis. I feel better than I sound. Here today is Harris Faulkner, Fox News contributor Katie Pavlich, host of Kennedy on the Fox Business Network, Kennedy, and joining us on the couch today, Republican strategist and chairman of GOPAC, David Abella, and he is outnumbered. Thanks for joining us. So much to get to today.
Much to get into today. Looking forward to it.
We got everything going on in the G20, and then we have all the political wranglings back here. We're glad you're here.
Thank you.
Let's get to it. So as we await the president's second meeting with Prime Minister Abe, along with India's Prime Minister, the White House is denying reports from Russian media that President Trump and Russian President Putin will have a brief meeting at the G20. Yesterday, President Trump canceled a meeting with Putin over a growing confrontation between Russia and Ukraine. Today, the White House said there is, quote, no scheduled pull-aside. And a short time ago, White House Press Secretary Sarah Sanders saying, quote, the Russian witch hunt hoax, which is hopefully now nearing an end, is doing very well. Unfortunately, it probably does undermine our relationship with Russia. However, the reason for our canceled meeting is Ukraine. Hopefully that will be resolved soon so that the productive conversations can begin. This morning, the president and leaders of Canada and Mexico signed a new trade deal to replace NAFTA, the president touting the agreement as a win for American workers.
The USMCA is the largest, most significant, modern and balanced trade agreement in history. All of our countries will benefit greatly. It is probably the largest trade deal ever made also. This is an amazing deal for our farmers and also allows them to use cutting-edge biotechnology and eliminates non-scientific barriers.
The president will also be sitting down with Chinese President Xi Jinping on Saturday amid growing trade tensions and questions over whether the U.S. and China can agree on tariffs and technology. Let me start there with that piece and that big meeting coming up with China, because with all the distractions that are going on here in the U.S., I can tell you for sure that is what the market and investors care about. The president has put forth this model where, in spite of all the criticism, he has made a deal with Mexico and with Canada and teed up to meet with China now. Do you think something gets done?
The most important meetings happening at this G20 summit meetings are the ones that have just occurred, which is the president meeting with the prime minister from Japan and the one he's about to have with the leader of India, because it sends a clear message to China. We are going after your neighbors to the east. We're going after your neighbors to the south. We are going to get deals with them. And let's keep in mind the two things that President Xi wants. He wants China to remain communist, and he wants to stay the leader. And in order to do that, he needs a deal with America. But it has to be done in a way that everybody comes out looking like a winner. And that's the key for the president. Can a deal be put together that allows the president of China to save face, look like he has gotten something for his country, but at the same time giving America what they want?
People have criticized the president, Kennedy, saying he loves tariffs, this is hurting America. What he's done, for sure, is applied pressure. And you look at the data out today, Chinese manufacturing activity at its slowest level in 28 months. This is having a big impact on China. It's hurting them. Does it put more pressure on their leaders to come to the table?
It absolutely does, because they need a short-term win. And they have two strategies here, because obviously President Xi wants to remain hidden, and he has anointed himself president for life. They've got the long-term, multi-decade strategy, and I think that's where the intellectual property theft comes in, because they essentially steal great American ideas and bolster Chinese technology and essentially manufacturing, and that's the long-term goal. That's what we should be shutting down, and that's where the president should stand as firmly as possible, so they're not stealing our great ideas for their long-term gain. Now, in the short term, as far as these tariffs, it is really going to hurt them, and you're absolutely right. They're going to have to craft a deal that boosts both economies and the world economy along with it, so we can have freer trade back and forth between both countries. Free trade means you don't steal other people's great ideas.
Yeah,
Yep.
absolutely. Well, and the president is in now, David, which I think you were alluding to, a unique position of leverage and power after having signed the USMCA today. And, you know, Democrats have criticized, well, he took, you know, pieces of that and put that into the agreement from NAFTA. It's not all that different. Well, then I would ask why they wouldn't automatically sign it when it gets to Congress and not make any textual changes. That aside, when you get ready to talk with China, and you mentioned the neighbors situation, you can say, well, you know, look at what I did in North America. Like, I'm willing to do what I need to do to get the best deal for the United States.
That's exactly right. And as you look at many of these summits, and while the media wants to focus on every camera angle that maybe shows a foreign leader not liking President Trump, the reality is he more often than not exceeds expectations at these summits. And you were talking about the Mexico and Canada deal today. There is another significant deal that has happened during this administration that is not talked about as we talk about Russia. And that is that we got Europe using more of our natural gas and less of Russia's natural gas. And so as we look at it from a trade perspective, this president has been very successful at getting deals done that help American workers.
And he's been very disciplined. I mean, that's what we've seen from the beginning, no matter how much pressure he gets from home, from people saying, you know, they target the group that supports him. People yell at him here in the U.S. He loves tariffs. He doesn't know what he's doing. He knows how to negotiate. I've said it from the beginning, and I never do this, but on business issues, it was clear he's negotiating with pressure. Yes?
He knows how to get all of the noise out and really focus in on what the task at hand is in a short period of time. He knows that the summit is important. Everybody's watching. When it comes to China, it's a very interesting situation for the Chinese president domestically on the ground, because China has been able to grow this middle class in China. And because things have been good economically for a huge, huge population of people, there haven't been many complaints about the censorship, the communism, the lack of property, the moving people in from the rural areas to the urban areas. But if that middle class no longer has economic stability and opportunity, which we're seeing, as you pointed out, Melissa, then the president of China has a problem on his hands with the middle class saying, well, what about these censorship and what about these opportunities that you promised us as a government that are no longer coming? And that is a problem for him domestically if he can't get a deal with the president.
And you touch on something that's so important, and that's economic mobility. That's something that is built into our system, but that is essentially very new in places like China and India, and that's why it's so important. You're absolutely right, because it's those economic issues that resonate everywhere, but that is new to them. And if he starts to shut that down, you are right. That's that presidency for life.
He's the strongest president of China since Mao, and there's a reason why he's been tightening his grip inside the country domestically as the economy hasn't gone south, but has certainly slowed when it comes to building, manufacturing, and all these other things that have been affected by these tariffs from the U.S.
And it's why it's all tougher for President Xi. In America, windmills blow because the wind blows them. In China, they blow because the government tells them to blow. And he has to manage an economy where unless he says it happens, it doesn't happen. And everything has to be right for him in order for that economy to keep going. That's why he has to have a trade deal.
So speaking of putting pressure on people, the person he's not meeting with, and we heard this at the beginning, is Vladimir Putin. Here's what he had to say a short time ago about who exactly canceled that meeting.
We don't like what happened. We're not happy about it. Nobody is. And hopefully they'll be able to settle it out soon, because we look forward to meeting with President Putin. But on the basis of what took place with respect to the ships and the sailors, that was the sole reason.
So I think as a nation, this is a bit of transparency that's actually been good for us to see. You know, I took an elevator ride with a couple of our colleagues yesterday, a candidate from your network, and the question was, well, do you think they're going back and forth and this is bad? And I'm like, no. This is actually really good for the American people to see, because there's been so much doubt about whether or not this president would do what was necessary with regard to Russia. And it's not vacillation that's been going on. It literally is like a negotiation that happens in clear plain sight. We get to hear what they threw a little bit of shade yesterday, by the way, Russia. When they put out their statement, they said, well, we haven't exactly heard officially from the president in the White House, but, you know, that gives us a useful time for some meetings and blah, 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 blah,
we
blah.
assume it's a reaction to domestic politics.
Right,
it really has nothing to do with us being big fat bullies and threatening to invade Ukraine.
Right. And so now we see the president doing what, and he said this was his decision. And we all remarked, wait, did he say it was his decision? Well, whose else would it be? And you had some thoughts.
Yeah. Well, certainly the Security Council that he has of Secretary Pompeo and the Chief of Staff Kelly and Bolton have all been very strong about their wanting a strong stance against Russia. But and you mentioned a little bit of shade of the domestic side. Look at the actual policies towards Russia. Sanctions have been put on place. We've gotten the European countries doing more trade with us than taking away from Russia. On a policy perspective, we have been far tougher on Russia in this administration than we have in previous administrations.
So you weren't surprised to see Russia maybe throw a little bit of
what's Russia best at, and what have they been best at for decades, going back to President Reagan, which is to be agitators in the U.S. system. And what can they do to cause problems and divisions in the U.S.?
I know your voice is going, but I have to pick your brain on something. So if they do meet on the sideline, for instance, what gets, because you've covered these things on FBN, what gets done really?
If they meet on the sidelines with Russia?
Yeah.
Boy, that's a tough one, because if it were truly about business, you kind of get down to what is it that I really need? Why aren't we able to meet? Where are we? And those sideline meetings can be so much more effective because they're more quick, they're more to the point. With Russia, it is really tough to know, because you don't know where these two are, and it isn't just about money. It's about the power between them. So
we'll be covering every second here on Fox.
Absolutely. All right, quick note to our viewers this Saturday from the Reagan Library. Bill Hemmer, Brett Baer, Jennifer Griffin, and other Fox News anchors and correspondents, they're all going to be moderating some terrific panels during the Reagan Defense Forum. It will stream live on Fox Nation, and parts will air on the Fox News channel. Chris Wallace will anchor Fox News Sunday live from the Reagan Library as well. Check your local listings for times on the Fox Broadcast Network, or catch it all here at 2 p.m. and 7 p.m. Eastern. All right, former President Obama weighing in on the partisan division in our country, appearing to lay some of the blame on the media. We'll debate. Plus, President Trump and his team are fighting back amid a flurry of activity in the Mueller probe. The latest revelations and whether they put the president at the forefront of the investigation.
Growing fallout over the latest developments in the Mueller investigation. President Trump's personal attorney, Rudy Giuliani, is accusing the special counsel of deliberately timing new court filings to coincide with the president's departure yesterday for the G20. Shortly before the Air Force One took off for Buenos Aires, the president's former personal attorney, Michael Cohen, pleaded guilty to lying to Congress about talks during the 2016 campaign to build a Trump Tower in Moscow. That deal never happened. The Washington Post, citing the new court filings as evidence the president has become a central figure in the investigation. Meanwhile, Yahoo News is reporting Mueller is also looking into Ivanka Trump and Don Jr. and their work on the scrapped Moscow project. This is BuzzFeed is reporting the Trump organization planned to give Vladimir Putin a $50 million penthouse apartment in that said building. Trump's attorney, Rudy Giuliani, called the report, quote, crazy. The president pushing back on all of this, tweeting this morning, "Oh, I get it. I am a very good developer, happily living my life. When I see our country going in the wrong direction," parenthetically, he says, to put it mildly, "against all odds, I decide to run for president and continue to run my business, very legal and very cool." Talked about it on the campaign trail, lightly looked at doing a building somewhere in Russia, put up zero money, zero guarantees, and didn't do the project. Witch hunt! Exclamation point. The likely incoming chairman of the House Judiciary Committee, Democrat Jerry Nadler, says there's still a lot we don't know about what Mueller has found.
It's also clear that Mueller knows a lot that we don't know, and that Cohen's testimony is far more relevant than just his involvement with payoffs to Stormy Daniels, but gets into a lot of other things that Trump was doing, such as the business dealings with the Russians.
Yeah, I think my brain just broke. So there's a lot that we don't know, but we're going to go ahead and say what we do know based on stuff that really doesn't even have evidence yet because we haven't seen it.
One thing we know is Michael Cohen is why bad lawyer jokes were created. Think about your worst one, and he personifies it. That said, Mueller can make somebody's day bad But nothing yet to date has suggested it would be the president's. Everything has been about business deals. Everything has been about everything except what this investigation started on, was did Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump get in a room together and say, hey, here's how we're going to make sure Hillary Clinton doesn't get elected president. Now, if we're going to start getting into business deals, if that's what this new Congress wants to focus on is business deals, then let's start with Nancy Pelosi, and every time she votes on grapes, does her vineyard get a benefit from that? And the two wealthiest U.S. senators in the U.S. Senate are Richard Blumenthal and Dianne Feinstein, both of whom got wealthier while they served in Congress. So if we're going to start investigating people's business deals, let's do everybody in Congress.
Yep, I like that idea.
All right.
Yeah.
I want to just hit where some of the president's critics are hitting him right now, Kennedy, and pick your brain on it. So when those critics say, well, the president isn't telling the truth because he said that he wasn't doing deals with Russia, and now he's talking about it as if he had talked about it contemporaneously, what do you say?
I think all of those things can be true at the same time. And the president is...
Would that make the president not telling the truth be not telling the truth now?
I don't know, man. I think that some of this is fluid for him. And I think, you know, his memory sort of changes with time. And that's one of the reasons his lawyers didn't want him sitting down with special counsel. But in his defense, and I really believe this, he thought he wasn't going to win. And he needed other stuff to do after November 8th, 2016, and was continuing along with the real estate development business and the other aspects of the family business. And I think we were all shocked when he actually won that night. And I think him most of all. So the question is, how far back do you go punishing someone? Is it when they first think about dabbling in politics? Is that high school, college, law school? Is it 5 years ago? You know, what is the timeline? Is it when he became the nominee? When is it more legally problematic for him? And notice that Michael Cohen, in his guilty plea, he told Congress, he lied to them about the Moscow building development. And when he was asked why he lied, he said that he was staying consistent with the president's political messaging. He didn't say because the president told me to.
Right.
That would be problematic.
Yeah, my question here is, what is the implication? So even if Donald Trump had, or his organization, not him directly, had offered Vladimir Putin to have the penthouse in Trump Tower, when you do business in Russia, if you are going to do business, you have to go through Vladimir Putin. There is no other way in that country to do business. Is the implication that if they gave Putin this penthouse that he somehow would support Donald Trump for the presidency? Because if that is true, then why did Bill Clinton take $500,000 from a Russian bank and he was directly thanked personally by Vladimir Putin, and his wife was running for president? So if the implication is that it benefited Donald Trump, there's the same implication that it benefited Hillary Clinton. So I'm just not sure what the point is here when it comes to someone who has a global enterprise, who is doing business in a foreign country with a leader who controls all of the business deals, including with people in his own country, of what exactly the end game is and what it has to do with Russian collusion, which the entire special counsel was supposed to be based upon.
When I read that report about them promising to give away, or potentially promising to give away, that $40 million penthouse,
yeah.
I laughed out loud in my office, because anyone who covered President Trump in business knows the Trump organization is actually cheap as hell. Sorry. I mean, they would not have given away anything that they didn't absolutely have to. To me, that sounds like, hey, guess what? Here's the price of doing business. You have to do this.
Yeah.
An idea that was floated. And, you know, whether or not they would have ever done it, to me, you would have to have them, or any other New York real estate developer who doesn't, none of them give away anything.
I want to go back to the president's critics on this, because I think this is one of the main reasons why this has bubbled up. Because now we have an idea of whether or not he's part of the Mueller investigation at the center. And now that's being said because we know a couple of the questions. What do you think?
It is trying to expand the net beyond what this investigation started at, which is, did the Trump campaign collude with the Russians to defeat Hillary Clinton? And now we're talking about potential business deals before he became president of the United States. And you'll hear critics say, oh, he's giving Putin special treatment now. Is special treatment sanctions and bombing Syria and doing deals with Europe to take economic activity away from Russia? If that's Vladimir Putin's friend, who's his enemy?
So there's a theme here, though, that I picked up on, and it is that reach back. It happened with Paul Manafort. It's happened with Michael Flynn, where you reach back, you see what people were doing before the campaign.
Can I make one
yes.
point there? Because Alan Dershowitz pointed out that the pleas and the charges and the indictments that have all come from the Mueller investigation have all happened after Robert Mueller became involved. These aren't necessarily indictments because of activity that took place during the campaign. They were procedural indictments, and that again, I think the president could be, as Dershowitz also pointed out, in political deep yogurt, but the legal side, there's still a lot to be learned, and people would be foolish to rush to judgment.
The political matters because we're looking at 2020 already, so that's all that matters. All right, we'll move on. We're awaiting a court hearing as attorneys for former FBI Director James Comey are seeking to dismiss a House subpoena to have him talk behind closed doors. Lawmakers want answers on the DOJ's actions in the run-up to the 2016 election. Comey doesn't like the format, but House Republicans say it's way past time for them to hear from him. Stay with us.
We need to know what Jim Comey was doing with regard to the initiation of the so-called Trump-Russia collusion investigation.
Fox News alert, a federal judge is set to hold a hearing just over an hour from now as lawyers for former FBI Director James Comey try to block a subpoena for House Republicans. The GOP wants him to testify behind closed doors next week about the DOJ's investigation during the 2016 election. Comey's lawyers arguing in court filings, quote, Mr. Comey should not be coerced into participating in an improper and partisan effort to undermine the legitimacy of an institution that he served for the better part of 4 years. There is no legitimate reason why Mr. Comey cannot provide sworn live public testimony about the matters under investigation. House Judiciary Committee Chair Bob Goodlatte responding to Comey.
We've already indicated that we will release the transcript of this under oath private interview the next day. 16 other people have testified under oath in the same setting that we're asking him to do it, and his claim that he needs to do it in public is, in my opinion, a farce. Quite frankly, 5 minutes is not enough time for an experienced former prosecutor like Trey Gowdy or John Ratcliffe to follow all of the threads that need to be followed.
So while Comey says he's concerned with leaks, he's been accused of leaking himself, let's not forget, specifically when he admittedly gave his friend memos of private conversations that he had with the president. In the meantime, House Republicans have also subpoenaed former Obama Attorney General Loretta Lynch to appear on Tuesday. Katie, I mean, in fairness, James Comey doesn't like to do anything if there isn't a camera present.
Right.
I mean, it's not worth speaking if you don't have a audience to grandstand in front of.
Look, this actually is enraging to me. James Comey was the head of the FBI. Do you think that any regular civilian who gets a subpoena from Congress or the FBI has the ability for 2 seconds to negotiate the terms of where they appear and when and what questions are asked? This is a totally privileged, out of touch, entitled government bureaucrat who thinks he is not only above the law, but above the same standard of the law that everybody else out in America has to comply with. And the idea now that he is trying to dictate the terms after everything we know about what he did is absurd and ridiculous, and it is an affront to everybody else who has to follow the rule of law to the letter every single day, or they face consequences like going to prison or jail.
Well, and to speak to how important it is that they hear from James Comey, there is in fact that negotiation going on that the rest of us wouldn't have access to.
Right.
And so we know that because it's now being reported that perhaps there would be a release of transcript the very next day after this. So you can sit down, you can say what you have to say behind closed doors. Well, then I ask the question, why not just put it all out there to bear to begin with? Unless you think you can get something without leaking classified information. That's what I think the bigger concern should be, would that get out? Not so much whatever he's concerned about in terms of fairness.
As worthy as this investigation may be, the evidence is that Comey's already lied to Congress. So what makes us think this investigation or this hearing would be any different? And it probably wouldn't be. And here, the reality is in the next few weeks, Goodlatte's going to go from being the chairman to not being the chairman, and the Democrats going to come in, and we'll never hear about this again.
Can I just make one point on that quickly? Republicans, if they believe truly that he has lied under oath and they have evidence for that, they have the ability and the power to refer him for criminal prosecution. So they have a time period now to do that, and we'll see if they actually do based on what they claim is Comey lying under oath.
Wow. And Kennedy, back to that point, how rich is it for him to talk about leaking? I mean, we all remember that interview he did with Bret Baier when he kept saying, you know, Bret Baier kept saying, well, but you went and you took these materials and you gave them to your friend to then share with the media. That is a leak. And he was like, that's not a leak in my book.
Well, no, of course not, because it directly benefits him, which just points to his malignant narcissism. So he only wants to testify in public because he wants to increase his brand and, you know, his appeal to a general audience so he can get higher speaking fees. That's offensive because, you know, you're looking at someone, he leaked that stuff in order to launch the special counsel. He also has his deputy director was fired for leaking. And you have, you know, two people working under him who were overseeing the Hillary Clinton investigation and then shepherded the Russia investigation. And they were anti-Trump and they had text messages going back and forth and they were working for special counsel. So there are so many conflicts of interest that still have yet to be resolved. I'm not really that interested in James Comey's brand. I want the truth, and I fear we're never going to get it. Yeah. And it just goes to show how partisan he is if he only wants to give that truth to one side.
All right, well, with just about a month before power shifts in Congress, House Democrats have begun setting their sights on Michael Cohen. Lawmakers say they want President Trump's former longtime attorney back on Capitol Hill for a new round of questioning after he admitted lying to the Senate Intel Committee. Politico predicts Cohen will be returning to Capitol Hill, and that would be a spectacle to rival the Watergate hearings. Yeah. One Democrat on the House Judiciary Committee, Jamie Raskin, said, quote, obviously you have to be a little bit ginger with anybody who's been lying for a long time, but he is clearly going to be a truth-telling refugee in Trump world. I would expect that he has something to contribute to the congressional investigations of the lawlessness of the Trump administration. Meanwhile, Ohio Congressman Jim Jordan has been tapped to become the top Republican on the House Oversight Committee. When Democrats take control in January, Congressman Jordan is expected to be a fierce defender of the president. I see you having nonverbal sorts of reactions to this, and I want to know what you're thinking.
My first thought is Michael Cohen has exceeded his 15 minutes of fame. He is well past. That said, it is head-shaking to now Democrats see Michael Cohen as being the great truth teller. That just, and she referenced it in her quote, that here's a guy that's already lied to us in Congress, but now he's going to tell us the truth.
Yeah.
And it all goes to
not
the
just
Democrats
like
will bend.
Lied to the Senate Intelligence Committee. I mean, yeah, and so now you're...
They're going to bend whatever fact they get to what makes it look like Donald Trump did something wrong, no matter what it is.
So, Kennedy, as you kind of forecast this out, this was somebody who the president trusted. This was his personal attorney. There was a lot of talk about whether or not there was attorney-client privilege in the very beginning of this. Mm-hmm. Regardless of all of that, you've got somebody who potentially can tell you things that his client never thought would ever be repeated. And that is completely fair because that's what happens when you hire somebody.
Yeah, is anything protected by attorney-client privilege anymore? It's very curious, but I don't understand how people could take someone who has clearly lied and just assume that now they are the flavor of the week. Therefore, this version of their events is to be believed. And, you know, this is someone who has been gaming the system, and he's a gross person. And I hate to say it, but the president has attracted some doozies over the course of...
I don't even think he would argue with that at this point.
I mean, look at Manafort, Roger Stone, Michael Cohen. It's like, come on, man. It's time for you to drain your own swamp and, you know, move forward without some of these hangers-on, because these slimy, Vaseline-covered salamanders do more harm than good.
Wow. So in the past 24 hours, I've heard all the overly cute people who hate the president say, well, why would someone lie about lying? That just doesn't make any sense. You know, I've never, in the history of your career, you've never heard anyone lie about lying, and the guest says, no, I've never heard of that.
Oh,
I'll tell you why. To diminish his time in jail.
Yeah.
I mean, come on. Like, let's look at this through a non-biased lens. You would lie in the first place, hoping for benefit from the president or to obscure something you did illegal. You would lie in the second place because now you realize the president's not going to give you a deal and you're trying to cozy up to Mueller.
Yeah.
I don't know where the truth lies. And the president may very well have done something wrong. Michael Cohen almost certainly did something wrong. But when you say, why would someone lie about lying? To lessen their time in jail.
Well, he's facing prison time, so
Yes.
he did something wrong.
Yeah.
You know, as you're talking, though, I'm thinking Democrats are going to take over the House. Democrats are going to have a position that they haven't had in a few years. Is this really where you want to go? And I know the talking point of walk and chew gum at the same time. But every time I interview a Democrat, there's another investigation that they're going to tack along. So maybe that's the gum chewing. Where's the walking?
It's what they campaigned on, investigations and impeachment.
And the American people want to see that?
Like
We're gonna find out.
The American people want true accountability to root out government corruption,
But
whether
it
you're
never
Republicans
comes
or
this
Democrats.
way.
And they also get very sick and tired, whether it's Republicans doing it or Democrats doing it, of investigation after investigation and hearings that never come up with any accountability for anybody and just turn into political shows for these lawmakers on Capitol Hill trying to make a name for themselves for whatever political reason.
And does anybody think if they go behind closed doors and they don't release transcripts and they keep this silent, that there would be more or less grandstanding? I would say probably less. So when you put it all on display the way James Comey wants it, it's going to be a show.
That's a great question, because which is worse, not knowing or seeing a clown show?
I think that the essential difference between behind closed doors, it isn't necessarily about the leaks. It isn't about transparency. What it's about is that 5 minutes versus a long period of time. And you can wait out and not answer a question for 5 minutes. It's much harder in the course of an hour to really sit there and evade answering your question.
All right, I understand we want to go back to the G20 and Buenos Aires, Argentina. President Trump is speaking right now. Let's watch together.
Now what we call a trilateral. The relationships between our three countries extremely good, extremely strong. I think with India maybe stronger than ever, and with Japan I think stronger than ever. We're doing very well together. We're doing a lot of trade together. We're doing a lot of defense together, a lot of military purchases, and we're going to now have a little discussion between the three of us. So thank you very much.
ये एक बहुत बड़ा अच्छा अवसर है कि लोकतांत्रिक मूल्यों को समर्पित अमेरिका, जापान और भारत तीनों मिलकर के विश्व में शांति, समृद्धि और स्थिरता के संबंध में हम मिलकर के क्या भूमिका अदा कर सकते हैं। मेरे लिए खुशी की बात है कि दोनों देश हमारे स्ट्रेटेजिक पार्टनर रहे हैं, दोनों मेरे अच्छे मित्र रहे। इन तीनों के साथ हमारा मिलकर के काम करना अपने आप में एक सुहाना अवसर है। और ये भी खुशी की बात है, अगर मैं इसको एक अलग एक्रोनॉमी में बोलूं तो जापान, अमेरिका, इंडिया, JAI.
So we have been watching for the opportunity that we told you about. You heard the president explaining a trilateral to the people in the room. That's Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, who is to his right, because I'm looking at the screen right now, and then the Prime Minister of India, Narendra Modi, who's speaking right now. So as they kind of toggle back and forth between their languages and English, we will go back. But this is a very important meeting, Melissa.
Yes, because David made a fantastic point earlier. Those people are China's neighbors. So this scene right here is a message to China.
Excuse me one second. We have translation? All right, let's watch it.
Playing a big role together for world peace, prosperity and stability. I'm also happy that both the countries are our strategic partners. Both of them are very good friends, and the three countries together, it is a matter of good fortune that we will work together. When you look at the acronym of our three countries, Japan, America and India, it is J, which in Hindi or in India in general is for success. In a way, this Jai success, this message, is a good message that goes out. It's a good beginning. And together, as I said earlier, we'll be playing a very big role to work together for world peace, prosperity, and stability.
All right, and so now we have the Prime Minister of Japan, Shinzo Abe, and you know what is critical here, David, as we were talking about earlier, is that you have the whole world watching after a deal that was already made with Mexico and Canada this morning. They inked that deal, the president did, and so we know that this president will jump in and he'll renegotiate trade, and his critics can say, well, it's not that different from NAFTA. No doubt the men on that podium right now, they see a man in the center who's willing to get into it, and China already, their neighbor, has been feeling the tariffs in this tough conversation.
There isn't a country in this world that doesn't want to do business with the United States and have access to our markets. And there is no doubt the president of China is sitting in his hotel room looking at this press conference right now, or will watch the replay of it, because this is more than just economics. We are doing economic activity with these two countries. We are also doing military with these two countries, and they're buying our military weapons.
All right, President Trump is taking some questions. Let's watch. And as timing has it, sometimes that goes on. He was getting shouted. Hold on one second. He was getting shouted some questions to him, and he answered quickly. And if we can, we'll play it back. But they're finished for now. And as we see the situation at the G20 come back, we will bring it to you live.
All right. I just wanted to add really quickly that something I heard yesterday about China that's really important. This is already working because they have already lowered tariffs, China, as of November 1st on 1,500 products, textiles, paper products, electromechanical equipment. I was fact-checking this with the Brain Room, and I wanted to make that point because people say, you know, what effect is it having? Yeah. China has already caved on products.
Now,
they're already
and this is something to watch here very quickly.
We'll come right back to you right after this.
I will tell you
Stay
later.
close.
Here we go. That is a picture of the president meeting with Prime Ministers Abe and Modi from Japan and India, respectively. That is a G23 way. That's a trilateral conference. The president also apparently bumped into Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. We don't know the content of that sideline. Very curious as to what they might have discussed. What do you think went on in that quick conversation, David?
Can only speculate, but what did come out of this summit that's significant is the deal between the United States, Mexico, and Canada, and this meeting that just occurred there between the president and the leaders of China, of Japan and of India, because those are significant to get China. And that is what matters out of this summit.
Melissa, one of our closest allies, obviously Japan, and seeing Japan, India, and the United States, that sends a pretty clear message to China, because India also has an emerging middle class, and they would love to have access to the U.S. markets and U.S. products.
Yeah, I mean, he's saying, I'm making a deal with these guys, and you better get on board because you don't have a choice. The data that's coming out of China, we were talking about it before, is showing just increasing pressure on the population, on the kingdom itself. And, you know, we've also seen China cave, and I mentioned that briefly before the break. And somebody mentioned it to me yesterday. I wanted to do a Brain Room fact check here at Fox. There are so many products as of November 1st that the Chinese lowered the tariffs on, signaling that they're coming around and that they want this to end. So I think the president is making a ton of progress.
Yeah, real quickly, too, Vladimir Putin is seated next to, at that leadership meeting this morning, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia. They exchanged pleasantries right there on the camera, so we could see that as well. So just reporting the news.
Interesting stuff.
Very interesting, and we'll keep you posted on all of it. We'll be right back. Stay with us. Here we go. That is a picture of the president meeting with Prime Ministers Abe and Modi from Japan and India, respectively. That is a G23 way. That's a trilateral conference. The president also apparently bumped into Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. We don't know the content of that sideline. Very curious as to what they might have discussed. What do you think went on in that quick conversation, David?
Can only speculate, but what did come out of this summit that's significant is the deal between the United States, Mexico, and Canada, and this meeting that just occurred there between the president and the leaders of China, or of Japan and of India, because those are significant to get China. And that is what matters out of this summit.
Melissa, one of our closest allies, obviously Japan, and seeing Japan, India, and the United States, that sends a pretty clear message to China, because India also has an emerging middle class, and they would love to have access to the U.S. markets and U.S. products.
Yeah, I mean, he's saying, I'm making a deal with these guys, and you better get on board because you don't have a choice. The data that's coming out of China, we were talking about it before, is showing just increasing pressure on the population, on the kingdom itself. And, you know, we've also seen China cave, and I mentioned that briefly before the break. And somebody mentioned it to me yesterday. I wanted to do a brain room fact check here at Fox. There are so many products as of November 1st that the Chinese lowered the tariffs on, signaling that they're coming around and that they want this to end. So I think the president is making a ton of progress.
Yeah, real quickly too, Vladimir Putin is seated next to, at that leadership meeting this morning, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia. They exchanged pleasantries right there on the camera, so we could see that as well. So just reporting the news.
Interesting stuff.
Very interesting, and we'll keep you posted on all of it. We'll be right back. Stay with us.